How's it going, ladies and gents? It's Meathead Moto here, back with you for another video, pumping up your day with some motorcycle content. And we're headed into work this morning. I got a half day today. We're gonna have to get the bike serviced. I need a new rear tire for sure. Wouldn't be surprised if I get talked into changing out my front because it's a little cupped in a certain way. But this morning, as we're going into work, I think I'm going to talk about the new Pan America and talking about why I think Harley needs to completely switch over to liquid-cooled motorcycles, at least for the majority of their fleet. I don't know if you guys can see that reflection, but that reflection though. Woo, got good oil pressure. Means we got oil flowing. Ah! Apparently, I am not quite ready to stand today. Upon the topic that I want to talk about today, about liquid cooling, we got to kind of talk about what the advantages of liquid cooled motors are versus oil cooled, or I should say air cooled, like we have here with the Milwaukee 8. So the biggest primary advantage of a liquid-cooled motor versus an air-cooled motor is consistent cooling temperatures or consistent engine temperatures while running at higher RPMs or just straight up riding through normal usage. And the advantage of having a liquid-cooled motor versus an air-cooled motor, you also get the ability to run like higher compression. You can run higher RPMs. You can run to higher RPMs without having to worry about excessive cylinder wear. You don't have to. You have a lot less to worry about as far as hot spots in the cylinder that could cause pre-detonation. You also just have a lot of tighter tolerances on your motor that again allow it to go to higher RPMs and therefore make more horsepower. In the idea of if I had perfect fuel flow, perfect airflow to my motor, and I was going to just rev out to the moment where the motor explodes, I can rev out a liquid-cooled motor to far higher RPMs before that motor fails, and therefore make more horsepower than a liquid-cooled motor versus an air-cooled motor like this Milwaukee 8. So you might be asking, well, why do I think that Harley Davidson needs to completely ditch the air-cooled motor? Well, it comes upon the back of how stellar the reviews have been for the new Pan America and the new Revolution Max motor. Now, obviously, this isn't the first time Harley Davidson's actually made a liquid-cooled motor. The first time was with the VRod, and the VRod was kind of a cult classic now, but in its time there's just a lot of people that were not happy with it, and I think that a lot of that was due to the timing versus the actual anger towards the motor or anything. I think if Harley Davidson were to have released the VRod in the modern era, in like the 2010s, or say right now 2020, you'd have a different reaction than you did back when it first released in, I think, the early 2000s. VRod, I think, it's not the greatest looking bike, and I know if I have anybody that likes VRods on this channel, I'm gonna kind of like step on your toes, but I don't mean any disrespect to the VRod. The VRod is, I think, one of the very few Harleys that came from the factory with 100 plus horsepower on 1,000 cc's. You know, my bike has 1,700, and I had to get a cam in it to make 100 horsepower. Like, that thing also screams out to higher RPMs. It sounds so good when they rev out those VRods. So in the end, I think the VRod had its time, but I think if you had released it into like more like 2018 timeline or like 2019 timeline with maybe some better looks, it would have done better. But it's still one of the top muscle bikes that people consider when they're like, oh, I'm looking for a muscle cruiser. I mean, it's up there along with like the VMAX and the M109R Suzuki. Like, those bikes, that VRod is still a very iconic motorcycle for horsepower and the hooligan speed demon that it is. So why do I think that Harley needs to start adopting the liquid cooled to their bigger twins? Simply comes down to what the competition is doing now. You know, with the Challenger, it performs far better than a 114 M8 Street Glide, Road Glide. It flat out performs them on 108 cubic inches. And it's just simply because it's liquid cooled. I mean, it is dual overhead cam as well, which plays a factor in horsepower wise. But I think that Harley Davidson could take their own spin on a liquid cooled motor, especially if they want to walk the line between being heritage and being innovative. And I think that the way that they could do it is taking a page out of Chevy's book from their pushrod V8s that they have. I mean, the LS LT line of V8s that they have produced that are still pushrod motors have produced, you know, there's a reason why they call it LS swapping motors, because the LS block is small enough but produces a crazy amount of horsepower and torque that everybody likes to put it in stuff like Miatas. So in that regard, it would be kind of cool to see Harley Davidson take some inspiration from like GM and produce a liquid cooled pushrod motor to compete with Indian's liquid cooled dual overhead cam motor, and let people decide whether they want a more torquey motor or if they want more horsepower motor. I think that that would be an interesting way to see it done. It would be similar to how Chevy and Ford have gone at things. You know, the 5-liter Coyote is a dual overhead cam motor. The Chevy Camaro SS and the Corvette run on a pushrod V8 that produces, you know, 500 horsepower, 495 in the new Corvette. I mean, it'd be kind of a similar vein where it's like they're still liquid cooled, but it comes down to the cam selection of the pushrod versus pushrod. You gotta. I think that they can find a line to walk where they keep the heritage of a pushrod motor while also creating a reliably powerful liquid cooled motor and put it on these bikes, these touring bikes, the Softails, you know. Even put the Revolution Max in the Sportster, change up the Sportster frame, you know, make it maybe even a little bit more sporty, and, you know, just, I think that it could easily be done, but we still have to appease the people that are actually buying Harley Davidsons, and they are generally the older crowd. And, you know, I think that the older crowd is definitely wanting to have horsepower and torque without having to really try and work for it. I think we're getting better. We don't have the same crop of people that are buying Harley Davidsons as we did 20 years ago. Those are not the same people that are buying Harleys. You know, they're actually well into their 70s and 80s now. So they most likely are not really buying motorcycles. So the current crop of 50s, 40s, and 60-year-olds still seem to care a little bit about how well their bikes perform. And not just the status symbol of saying I own a Harley Davidson, you know. But I think that based on the reaction to the Pan America, it will not be long before we see liquid cooled big twins. I do think that they could keep some of the heritage too by having the air-cooled motors like the M8 on some bikes, especially the Softails. I could see the Softails keeping them because the Softails weigh so much less than the touring bikes, so you don't necessarily have to put the crazy horsepower motor, the crazy horsepower liquid-cooled motor in those frames and still have happy customers, because they simply don't have to pull the same weight as a touring bike does. And they feel powerful as they do, in their current form. And then you get into the motor upgrades, and then all of a sudden it's a completely different animal. So, I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think that Harley Davidson is on the cusp of adopting liquid-cooled motors as their primary power plant in all their lineups, or do you think that only some of the lineups will adopt liquid cooled, or do you think that Harley Davidson is just going to keep doing what they've been doing and just kind of stagnantly stay the same or grow like every so often? Like, I'm interested to hear what you guys think, because me personally, I do think that they will adopt liquid cooling on most of their platforms in the future. I'm just not sure what the timeline is at this point. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you did enjoy the video, please like it, and it does help the algorithm recommend my video to more people, and therefore we grow more on this channel. I do upload every Monday and Friday, so hopefully this video is coming out on a Friday, and I will see you in another video.